The case of Wigan Athletic is one of the most complicated cases we've covered. The club with one of the best underdog stories under the local ownership of Dave Whelan, they achieved historic feats, including a triumphant run in the Premier League and an FA Cup win in 2013. However, fast forward to 2024, a combination of ownership changes marked by broken promises, financial crisis, and administration plagued the club, resulting in point deductions and ultimately relegation down the football leagues. In our next episode of How Not to Run a Football Club, we delve into the strange case of Wigan Athletic and what led one of the best run clubs in English football to a club fighting for existence. From 1995 to 2018, the club was owned by local entrepreneur Dave Whelan and progressed through the leagues, culminating in a second place finish in the English Championship in 2005. This would be the first time the Lactics would play top flight football in their then 73-year history, and Wigan were tipped to be relegated from the Premier League in their first season. But not only did they manage to stay up, they remained in the top flight for 8 years and claimed a 10th place league position in their first season. In that time, Wigan were also runners-up in the 2006 League Cup final and most famously beat Manchester City in the 2013 FA Cup final. Under Maverick coaches as varied as Paul Jewell, Steve Bruce and Roberto Martinez, Wigan was known for playing good football and bringing in players from unfashionable parts of the footballing world. Playing exciting football on a budget would not last forever, and in 2013, Wigan was relegated from the Premier League under Martinez, only a short time after winning the FA Cup. The club's decline can arguably be traced back to that moment. Wigan began to struggle financially. In 2012-13, Wigan's revenues totaled £56.4 million. 3 years later, they had dropped to £15.7 million, and in 2018-19, they were just at £11.5 million, the lowest in the Championship. Wigan's wage bill went from £43.7 million in 2013 to £19.4 million in 2019. A logical reduction, but the wage to income ratio was at a very dangerous 168%, which again was one of the highest in the Championship. Wigan made a net loss of £9.2 million in 2018-19, making it 5 annual losses in 6 seasons since their Premier League status ended. Whenever the club sell close to crisis, Dave Whelan would prop them up. However, it was announced that the club would be sold to a company in Hong Kong, the International Entertainment Corporation, or the IEC, for around $22 million. This would bring about the end of a 23-year ownership run by the Whelan family. Though Dave had stepped back from day-to-day things, his grandson David Sharp had taken on the chairman role instead. IEC was owned by a man known as Stanley Choi. Choi is a high-stakes poker star and a well-known businessman in Hong Kong. Fans expected a bit of high-fire excitement if nothing else. Things though would become very strange indeed. The club finished their first season under new ownership in the 18th spot, clear of relegation but not exactly fighting for those promotion spots. Unlike Whelan though, IEC was not keen to throw money into the club. Budgets were tightened and things were constrained compared to relative generosity of the Whelan family ownership. Concerns were brewing as IEC seemed to have made losses and was also issuing profit warnings. Their primary businesses in the hotel and casino industries in the Philippines were under pressure. Despite that, David Sharp said he had received assurances that the club would not be under pressure. IEC behind the scenes were beginning to regret their investment. A cocktail of issues caused by Brexit, a skyrocketing wage bill, and the COVID pandemic had created a 2-year headache for the owners. Losses had mounted and IEC could not bankroll the club as Whelan had. So it looked like another sale was on the horizon. A deal of around £40 million plus debt was agreed to sell the club. On the 4th of June 2020, IEC decided to sell the club to another Hong Kong based business, Next Leader Fund, or NLF. NLF was operated by a man called All Young Wai Kai, and Choi was a stakeholder of as much of 50% of NLF and IEC, so naturally this seemed rather dodgy in the first place. The EFL and the Hong Kong Stock Exchange quickly ratified the sale, and Wigan found itself owned by a whole new group. While Choi had relatively high profile outside of Hong Kong, the NLF was by contrast almost invisible. Less than a month after being bought by the NLF, Wigan went into administration. The fund that had bought the club was used to repay IEC for money it had put into the club, and that was it. No more backing was forthcoming. NLF refused to put the capital they had promised into the club, and Begbie's trainer was quickly appointed as the administrator. Wigan faced a 12-point deduction, and the sanction would be applied at the end of the 2019-20 season if the club finished outside of the bottom three after 46 games. On the 2nd of July 2020, the administrator said that they would investigate how the club ended up in administration less than a month after it changed owners. Very quickly, things began to take a strange turn. Recordings appeared of the EFL chairman Rick Parry discussing Wigan's ownership situation. At the same time, accusations suggested that the whole aim for putting the club into administration was for Choi to win a bet on Wigan to be relegated. Local politicians got involved, calling for an investigation into the takeover, with reports that the players and staff were not being paid and that redundancies were being offered. Players were also put up for sale, causing huge strife for the fans, players, coaching staff and those behind the scenes at Wigan. Around 75 staff lost their jobs. Players saw wages cut by about 20%. The Lactics won their final home game of the 2019-20 season 8-0, destroying Hull City. This, combined with other results, meant Wigan would not finish in the relegation places, so the 12-point deduction would be applied at the end of the current season. Wigan's appeal against the point deductions heard on the 31st of July as set to cost the club between 400 and 500k. Wigan drew 1-1 against Fulham in their final game of the season. The 12-point deduction pushed Wigan into the bottom three, meaning the club would play in League One if its appeal was unsuccessful, and on the 4th of August, the club's relegation was confirmed. Manager Paul Cook resigned as expected, and Liam Richardson took over as caretaker manager in the midst of a club in disarray. The sales process was a nightmare, with a £36 million debt to Kai hanging over the club. Despite fans fundraising to keep the club afloat, no owners could be found at first. A takeover from a consortium, Phoenix 2021 Limited, led by Bahraini business duo Abdulrahman Al Jayzi and Tala Mubarak Al Hamad, was agreed upon on the 15th of March 2021, and the takeover was confirmed on the 30th of March. The Lactics finished the 2020-21 season in 20th spot in League One, just above the relegation zone. In the 21-22 season though, the club ran through League One, earning promotion back to the Championship with a 3-0 win over Shrewsbury Town on the season's final day. With new owners in place, there was some hope that things might return to at least a shade of normality for Wigan Athletic. The 22-23 season was a disaster for the club, with the club relegated to the bottom spot of the league. This again was due to various financial issues during the season. In March 2023, Wigan reported a £7.7 million loss for the financial year and was met by wage delays due to liquidity issues. Fans had been here before. The club was docked 3 points in March 2023 for failing to pay wages to players and staff, and one of the club's key players, Stephen Coulter, accused the Bahraini Ownership of lying. 4 sets of wages had not been paid on time, and the team did not train in late March, amidst a protest about the situation at the club. Though wages were later paid, CEO Mal Brannigan resigned. On the 29th of April 2023, Wigan was relegated back to the third tier of English football, finishing at the bottom of the Championship. Wages were further delayed in May 23, with real fears that the club might fall apart completely. The Lactics started the 23-24 season in League One and began with points deductions for failing to pay wages. Al Jazmi missed a 24th of May deadline to put as much as £125 75% of the club's forecast monthly wage bill into an account for the EFL, meaning that the club started in League One with -8 points. Directorship resignations arrived in June 23 as more wages went unpaid, and amid fears of a winding up order from HMRC, the club was put up for sale. Optimism came on the 12th of June 2023 when the club was sold to local billionaire Mike Danson. Danson, also co-owner of rugby side Wigan Warriors, came forward to buy the club, and his ownership was approved on the 14th of June. Amid point deductions and ownership headaches though, the club led by FA Cup winning player Sean Maloney looks to be on the right track finally. For the first time since Dave Whelan was owner, Wigan has a locally based, credible and transparent ownership group. Under Maloney's watch, Wigan cut wages massively, had a strict limit on what could be spent, and was extremely forceful in reducing bloat and wastage in the squad. From scandals involving potential betting-inspired relegations and administrations, and a brief brush with liquidation, Wigan Athletic have been through the mill. They are just one of the many examples of poor ownerships causing more harm than good in lower league English football, and a need for more accountability and transparency in club ownership. Hopefully, under the leadership of Maloney and the ownership of Danson, Wigan can once again find steady footing within English football. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. We'll see you next time.